stinging at me! Help, somebody!
My HOA Karen had always been a problem, but I never imagined she'd take it this far. I had 3 beautiful beehives tucked behind flowering bushes in my backyard, painted a calm sky blue, registered with the county, licensed, and completely legal. I loved them not just for the honey but for the peaceful hum, the way the garden flourished under their care, the small sense of accomplishment after each harvest. My neighbors loved them too. I'd even given jars of fresh honey as gifts. Everything seemed perfect until that Saturday morning. I was kneeling by the middle hive, gently inspecting the frames, when a shadow fell across the yard. I looked up, and there she was. Karen, arms crossed, hair perfectly coiffed despite the glaring sun, designer blazer unbothered by the sweat, staring at my bees like they'd personally offended her. "Those are beehives," she said, not as a question, but as if she'd just uncovered a criminal operation. I straightened slowly in my bee suit, bees crawling over my gloves and veil, and said, "Yes, they're beehives. I'm a licensed beekeeper." Her face twisted into that look, equal parts outrage and disbelief, and she launched into a speech about how dangerous bees were, how neighbors had complained, how the HOA demanded removal immediately. I tried explaining they were gentle Italian honeybees, legally registered, and pose minimal risk. She cut me off. "Doesn't matter. The HOA has standards." She turned sharply and left, leaving me standing there, buzzing insects clinging to me like an ironic coat of armor. 2 days later, the official letter arrived. 7 days to remove the hives or face fines escalating from $50 a day. Safety concerns, liability, property values, all nonsense. I double-checked the bylaws. No mention of bees. County law clearly allowed it. I drafted a polite but firm response, attaching documents from the county and my registration with the Beekeeping Association. I expected the board to fold. I was naive. 3 days later, I got a text from my neighbor. Karen's car was in my driveway. She was back, this time with 2 strangers, photographing my hives. My stomach dropped. I left work immediately, raced home, and found them gone. But the damage was done. Red X's spray-painted across all 3 hives. 2 hives dead. The 3rd struggling. I checked my security footage. Karen, methodical, deliberate, spraying each hive with a precision that could only come from practice or obsession. I felt a mix of rage and disbelief. My careful, peaceful bees destroyed by someone's obsession with control. I called my mentor, Frank, a grizzled beekeeper who'd survived decades of HOA nonsense. He chuckled knowingly when I recounted the incident and offered me replacement colonies. One was particularly defensive, a hybrid strain that chased threats relentlessly. I hesitated, then accepted. Revenge wasn't the goal, but justice? Perhaps. For new hives later, 3 gentle and 1 defensive, I positioned them along the side of my yard near the gate, visible from the street, plain wood boxes. Only I knew which hive was which. Karen couldn't resist checking. For days later, I watched her approach. She didn't notice the new placement, walked straight past the gentle hives, and finally reached the defensive one. Her knock was confident, aggressive, and catastrophic. Seconds later, a swarm exploded from the hive, black as night, buzzing with wrath. She screamed. She ran. Swatting, spinning, blazer whipping through the air, tripping over her own feet, a human whirlwind of chaos. I sat in the grocery parking lot watching the security feed, laughter bubbling uncontrollably. The woman who terrorized me for years was now herself in a storm of wings and stings. She barely made it to her car, bees still pursuing her, rocking the vehicle, tire marks burned into the street. I felt satisfaction, but a pang of guilt. This wasn't pure justice. I'd orchestrated it. And yet, she had vandalized my property, trespassed repeatedly. Karma? Or something darker? When the ambulance and police arrived the next day, I realized the story had shifted. Africanized hybrid bees weren't just offensive, they were legally complicated. Animal control needed to inspect. Suddenly, my plan for poetic justice teetered on disaster. After the police and paramedics left, I sat in my yard surrounded by bees, trying to breathe, trying to untangle the mess I'd created. Karen had made a scene that would haunt the neighborhood gossip for weeks, but now the county was involved, and I wasn't sure if I'd just escalated everything into a legal nightmare. I called Frank immediately. "Listen carefully," he said, voice tight with urgency. "Those bees, hybrid strain, they require special permits. Animal control could destroy them if they find out you're keeping them unregistered." My stomach sank. This was no longer about revenge. This was about survival. About keeping a hobby I loved from becoming a headline about aggressive bees attacking an HOA board member. And yet, somewhere deep inside, part of me couldn't regret watching Karen run screaming. Over the next week, I tried to focus on the peaceful hives, tending them carefully, harvesting honey, rebuilding what I had lost. But Karen wasn't done. Every few days, I'd catch glimpses of her through the corner of my eye, walking past my house, pretending to jog, peering over fences. She had become an omnipresent threat, her obsession with controlling my backyard turning her into a recurring antagonist. Then came the evening the second incident started. I was trimming roses near the side yard when I noticed a shadow in my peripheral vision. Karen had found a way to sneak through a neighbor's side gate, clearly aiming for the defensive hive again. My heart pounded. I couldn't risk another swarm catastrophe, not with authorities now watching. But neither could I let her intimidate me. I grabbed the empty smoker from my bee kit, holding it like a warning more than a tool. She froze when she saw me. Her expression shifted rapidly from determination to shock. And that's when I realized she had no clue which hive was which. A gamble. I could have called her out, but I let the tension build. A long pause, her brow furrowed, and then a sudden reach toward one of the hives. I shook the smoker, a warning hiss escaping, and the bees stirred slightly. She recoiled. Her confidence faltered. For 10 minutes, we stared, a standoff in a suburban backyard, humans versus insects, her arrogance versus my calculated caution. Finally, she retreated, muttering threats, and disappeared into the evening. My pulse remained high, adrenaline still crackling, but I had survived without a single sting or a police intervention. The next morning, I checked the hives. No damage. All bees active and healthy. Relief washed over me. But the shadow of Karen loomed. This wasn't over. She had lost control for a moment, yes, but she was learning, adapting, circling, waiting for the next opportunity. I realized I had to be smarter. Not just reactive, but proactive. I spent the next 2 days reinforcing the perimeter, adding cameras, placing clear but polite private property signage. I documented everything meticulously, legal paperwork in one folder, incident footage in another. Preparation became my armor. And through it all, the bees thrived, unaware of the human drama unfolding around them. Then came the unexpected twist. Frank called late one night. "You're not going to believe this," he said. He explained that the defensive hybrid hive had a behavioral quirk. In rare conditions, they react to visual stimuli from outside the hive differently than regular bees. Essentially, if Karen approached under certain light and shadow conditions, they might cluster in a threatening formation without stinging, an intimidating display of wings, buzzing, and synchronized movement. I laughed nervously. This could have been perfect or catastrophic. It reminded me that even nature isn't predictable, that my sense of control was an illusion. And yet, I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. The universe, or maybe just the bees, was now my ally, a reminder that power doesn't always come from authority. It comes from understanding, observation, and sometimes patience. The following weekend, Karen made her third attempt. She arrived early, before sunrise, thinking she could catch me off guard. I was already awake, camera feed on my phone, watching the yard in the dim morning light. She tiptoed like a cartoon burglar, unaware of how thoroughly I had documented every entry point. And she wasn't alone this time. A neighbor's child had apparently followed her out of curiosity. She approached the gate, glancing around, confident as ever. I sighed, poured myself a cup of coffee, and let the scene unfold. The defensive hive stirred slightly, clustering in anticipation. Karen's shadow fell over the yard, and I could see her fingers reaching out, hesitation in her movement, her usual bravado cracking. The hybrid bees were alert, wings vibrating, forming a living wall. And then she froze. Not stung yet, not harmed, but confronted with a buzzing, moving, synchronized swarm, she realized she had misjudged nature once again. The child let out a small giggle, Karen's panic momentarily diverting, and she lunged backward, tripping over a rose bush. Blazer snagged on a branch. I didn't intervene. Not this time. She scrambled to her feet, muttering, cursing, swatting wildly at the air. The bees followed her in formation, more a psychological terror than actual harm, forcing her to retreat. She disappeared down the driveway, leaving a trail of chaos in her wake, embarrassment visible even in pre-dawn shadows. I stood there, watching the sun rise over my restored hives, feeling a mix of relief and contemplation. I had set boundaries, respected nature, and allowed a balance to restore itself. Karen's obsession had met its match, not through aggression, but through understanding, preparation, and patience. I knew there would always be another day, another challenge, another HOA confrontation. But for now, the bees thrived, my garden flourished, and justice, whatever form it took, had been served. And in that quiet moment, sipping coffee, listening to the gentle hum of thousands of bees, I realized that sometimes the smallest creatures teach the biggest lessons. Power is not always what you wield, but what you respect, anticipate, and let unfold naturally.